Hello, everybody. All right, let's start this thing again. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about, so we're going to be doing some sculpting as usual, because we're going to keep doing this for a little while now. But also we're going to be talking about some of the maps we're going to be using. So today we're going to be doing some of the painting for specular maps and for the bump height map that we talked about yesterday. So I changed the face yet again, you know, still looking for the character, right? Like I made like a little bit more of a stylized, like grew his jaw quite a bit. Looks like kind of like one of those guys with the, you know, gigantism or something like that, you know, like looks like that it's a big jaw now. But it's kind of cool. I think it's nicer than it was before. It has more style, you know. I want to make it a little bit more stylized anyway. So the first thing I did here today, actually I brought those models from my Stan Winston model because they all share the same topology, right? And the whole intention that I told you, like if you have a nice topology, you can actually reuse for your other models. You're gonna save yourself a lot of time. You know, it's like you can reuse, you know, specular maps, bump height maps and things like that. Even the color map, you can use part of it, and obviously you're gonna have to tweak it. At this point, I didn't change my UVs just yet, so they're still using the old UVs. And the question that came up is that, are you gonna, you know, it's like unfold those UVs further, right? Because at this point, they kind of like, the model got stretched pretty far from the original one. And the question is, yes, once I'm kind of like, you know, good ballpark that I'm actually liking the character, which is not quite there yet. And I feel that I'm not going to be poking around too much with the bigger proportions, then I'm going to definitely do that. But for now, for all the tests we need to do, I can just use the old UVs. It should work just fine. Same for you guys. If you want to keep pushing the model around, you know, don't deal with UVs just now. You can keep doing the tests. But then later to create like a, you know, a clean UV, so you're not going to get a lot of stretching and you're going to get most of the UVs, then obviously you're going to just like do some extra unfold and then re-import the mesh back to ZBrush. But as long as we have everything in poly paint, right, like nothing is going to be destroyed. It's just hanging in there and waiting for a new model. So the first thing I did, I'm going to show you this. So this came from my Stan Winston model. So he's like right there, like, you know, look at this smiley face. And so I brought the models, like I brought this color here, which is the bump height. I brought the color map, which I already imported my model into it. So basically, like, you know, what I did, I just like brought the 3 subtools from the Stan Winston model, but because they share the same topology, I basically exported this model here at 1.1 million, which is my maximum resolution before HD, right? And then I went to those models here. So for example, we're going to do the same with this guy here. So this one is still out of place right there. And it's at 1.1 million. So I'm going to just import my model back in here. We're going to get to OBJ and then high res. So this guy here, import it. So it should conform to it. So I got like, just to have a copy of the model that matches every single texture pass, right? So now they all line up. I have the color in there and then those different passes. And let's talk about like how I painted those guys, like those maps, how to approach it. So see, like it's still not matching perfectly because I think I did some more tweaks afterwards in this guy here, but it's pretty close. So the first thing you're gonna do when I'm painting textures, I start with you know, with the skin shader first, just to start like the ballpark, just painting something just so I can see the forms a little bit. But then as soon as I get a little further, what I do, I actually switch to the flat color so I can see exactly what's being painted. And so what I do, I normally create those passes here inside of ZBrush. I don't use other software, right? And because we don't need like super super high resolution for it, you can get away with a fairly low res model to do that. So basically, what I'm saying is that this model here, I have HD geometry in it, right? So I got like all my HD geometry in there, baked in the higher levels and everything. Let's just confirm if it's there. Yeah, it's doing the preview. So that means we are there. And then those guys here, they don't have HD. So how to create this? You basically, like, if you click your model itself at the highest resolution, you can just say clone, right? If you just clone right here, or you can simply go to duplicate. So you can duplicate it as well. So you're going to create copies of this model, and then when you copy it, the HD is eliminated automatically. There's no way, like, it doesn't copy the HD with it. So once I do those copies, so basically, like, I create like 3 copies of them, right? One for, actually just 2 of them, because this one here, the color itself, I'm going to be painting on the model that has the HD, right? So I brought this one just so I have something to project if we need to have some reference for the color later. But basically, like, you can duplicate twice this model here to create those 2 copies, right? And then obviously, if you're duplicating, you're not going to go past 1.1 million, which is the amount of polygons we have before HD. But what I'm doing here, I'm actually subdividing one more time. So it goes to 4.4 million in my case. And then this one goes to 4.4 as well. So that's the maximum resolution I'm using. In this case here, for this texture specifically, the bump height one, I could just stay around 1 million polygons. It would be fine because I don't have any fine detail in it. This texture here, all it does is basically, like, it drives the height of the bump that we are using to break up the surface further. That little cell noise that we used yesterday, the alligator stuff, that's basically what we're going to be controlling with this map here. So in areas that we have more darkness like this, is the areas basically like that the bump's going to be almost none, close to 0, right? And then as you go lighter, the bump gets higher and higher, and then that means that those areas are going to be a little bit less shiny than the areas that are actually black, right? And this map here has to play together with the specular map, right? So this is the specular map here, which is very simple as well. It's very, very noisy, right? And in normal, like, what you do, you try to, it's like if you're representing, like, based on what happens with our faces, we have this T-zone, right? Which is basically the oily part of the face, which is basically the forehead. So that's the head of the T in there. And then all the way across the nose, and then the upper lip in here, and then the chin. Everything is more oily, right? But then obviously, like, the reason why I have my model render from the get-go, so we have that render task scene in Maya, is that I can actually compare this to references and then play with those values here on demand, basically. So I have, like, different setups, right? Like, I can use just one single light, or I can have, like, different HDRIs plugged in there. I can create, like, multiple dome lights, and each one of them can have a different HDRI plugged in it. And then I run, like, different lighting setups, different renders, and I see how the specular is reacting to all those different types of lighting, because sometimes you nail it, it looks really cool under a one lighting situation, and then you switch to something else, and then it's super specky. Everything is very shiny, right? So it's really cool to try to find an average point that it looks good for most of the lighting situations. So that's why I have, like, normally like a bunch of HDRIs plugged. So like I was saying before, like, you have to have this map here, the bump height, playing nicely with your spec map. And what I mean by that is this. Check this out. Like, this area here around the eye bags, you see that they're a little darker, right? So that means that I have less specular in there. So why do I have that happening like that? Because in my bump height mapping here, it's a little darker, as you can tell, in this area, right? So that means that I'm actually removing a lot of the micro bump from that area. So naturally, it's going to get a little bit more shiny and plasticky around there. So when I combine this with the specular, if I have too much specular in there, in this area here, as you remember from yesterday, I'm not going crazy with pores or anything, right? I'm just keeping, like, just like wrinkles around that area and pores around some the rest of the face. So that means that I have to find a way to play nice here. So there is a way I could do the opposite in here. For example, I could bring back the specular in here, right? But then I would basically, like, make this area a little bit lighter to actually break up, use the macro displace, macro or micro bump to actually break up further and make this area diffuse so it would not look plasticky. But I think what I found out is that I wanted that to look a little bit more of like have less of the micro bump, and then a little bit more of the spec. I think that's a little bit less of the spec. I think that's what I did. So, but this, the only way for me to figure out if this is working is by rendering constantly, right? So if I do a render and I saw like, okay, this area looks very, very specky now when I have the micro bump set this way, then I just go like on demand, and then I pick like, okay, what I want to do here, what I want to achieve. And then I realize, okay, I'm going to just reduce the specular in that area and see how it plays out. And then that's basically like the amount of darkness I had to add to get to the point I liked in the renders, right? So we're going to be talking about those two maps specifically before you do some extra sculpting, and probably like bring it to Maya, and then doing some sculpting as well, some rendering, just to test them out. To export those maps here, since they are not HD, and even if they are HD, to export like simply color maps, it goes super fast. It's like a few seconds per map, and then you're done, unlike displacement, right? So that should be fine for us to test. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to keep those guys as a reference here for us so we know what we are painting, right? And I'm going to just like paint one from scratch here. So for the bump height, let's get this guy here, and let's do what I told you guys that you can do on your side, which is like select your model, the one that has the HD, or it doesn't matter, and you just do a duplicate. Right, so now I have my duplicate in there. And then this guy, I'm going to name it. So I'm going to just click the layer, just click rename. And I can just name it like a bump height. Right. So we're going to be painting this guy here. So the first thing you're going to do, there's one bug in ZBrush that's kind of weird. Let's see if I can reproduce it here. So if you click your material and you switch to flat color, like I have right now. Let's see, why is it not showing? Let's see, startup, and then flat color. Let's see if what's happening is that I have that, let's bake this one. Let's bake the material to flat color and see this reverses it. So basically, like if the material was painted with mRGB material, right, you're actually going to bake the material into the model. So to reset it to flat color, you can actually do this, unless there's some bug happening right now. But you normally do this. You just select the material itself, and then you can just go to your color and just say like fill object. Now it's reset, right? So that means like if I did this with flat color selected, if I switch to any other material now, it should obey, you know, as I can switch the material correctly. But to reset it, you have to actually go to your flat color, select material only, right? And then do a color and then fill object. So that's what we need right now. We only have the color selected, right? So let's do, just to start with, let's switch to the skin shade so I can see a little bit of the forms. And then let's pick a color here. Let's start with a very dark, almost black. So something like this, almost completely black. And let's do, you know, selected the RGB at 100%, right? Because basically ZBrush is going to fill obeying the intensity you have in here. So make sure you have it 100. Then I'm going to go to color and then fill object again. So now I have a very, you know, dark color in there. And that means like this is the height of the bump overall for the face, right? And now I'm going to have to pull some of this, the color back. So let's get to my standard brush. And I'm not gonna, this is like the kind of map that you don't need detail to it. It's just like to modulate by areas, right? Like large areas. So what I'm gonna do, it's hard to see what we are doing here. So I'm gonna just, I can crank a little bit the intensity as long as I remember to reverse this later. So if you go to render, you can go to adjustments in here, click adjust, and you can actually bring the brightness up. So you can actually see the color a little bit better. And then later, you're just gonna go back there and just remove that. But just so I can see a little bit more. So let's go to RGB. And I'm gonna keep it, instead of like 100%, let's use something like 10% for the RGB. And then I'm gonna switch to white first. Actually, let's use a very, very low value, like maybe 1 or 2, something like that. So I'm gonna have to think now what I'm gonna need to do here, right? Because if I'm using a very dark material, a very dark color to create like my overall height for the bump, I have to think about like what are the areas that are not gonna be super shiny, right? So I'm gonna start like with areas like the cheeks, for example, that I don't want it super shiny. I want the super shiny areas to be like the lips, around the eyelids, right? Like close to the eye, around the tip of the nose, and in some of the areas like here in the forehead, for example. Try to recreate that T-zone, right? But then in other areas, I'm gonna try to bring the color up. So just gonna turn off my Z add, just keeps my color in there. And then without alpha or anything, I'm just gonna be painting some of this color up. I'm gonna get like the cheeks around here. And then I'm gonna be thinking like, okay, basically like I'm gonna be doing the reverse here, right? Painting the, whatever I want it to look a little bit less shiny. So around here, the muzzle, I'm gonna keep a little bit of it, but I'm gonna start adding some white around the sides in here, probably the side of the face almost completely. Remember, you're gonna have a lot of bumpiness in there and the stubble and all that stuff. So I'm gonna be adding some of that. Neck as well. I'm gonna remove a lot of the speck from the neck. Not the speck, right? It's just like the micro breakups. But then obviously the specular map is another one we're gonna be painting next. So I could do this. For the ears, the inner part here is normally a little bit more shiny, more oily, right? But around the lobing here, you're gonna remove a lot of that. So I'm gonna have to like use more micro breakup. And then around this whole area here, the spiral, I'm gonna remove. So that's gonna have more micro breakup. So consequently, it's gonna get a little bit less shiny, right? So I'm gonna get here. I'm gonna go to the side of the, around the temporalis, get a little bit less of that, break up a little further. And then I'm gonna get to the sides of the nose in here as well. Same thing. A little bit to the side of the nose, but not much. Let's see if we can start seeing anything. If I go back to my render adjust, still hard to see, right? I think I went too dark. So I'm gonna bring up like more of this color here so I can actually see more stuff, and I'm gonna exaggerate the cheeks because I wanna make sure we are seeing it. Like that. I wanna make sure that just the lips are really, really dark. So let me add like a almost completely black around the lips. And then I'm gonna, you know, raise everything else. So lips gonna be very, very dark. Because I want like, basically like no micro breakup in the lips at all. And then for the eyelid, same thing. It is a little hard to see, isn't it? So let's do this. Let's pick one color here. Maybe like, let's get white, and let's see if ZBrush can do that for us. Let's try to raise the whole thing. Let's put like 5. Let's see if it works if we just do a color fill object. Yeah, let's do it again. Color fill object. Yeah, okay. So now it's seeing more stuff, right? I can even do like, should I do it one more time? Let's do one more time. We can correct in my if that's the case. Okay, so now we can see it. And so let's exaggerate this a little bit more, like back to 1 around here. Eliminate some on the side, some more in here. And then you can darken the whole thing if you need to. And now we're gonna actually bring the lips again, black, almost like completely black. And this one I can actually use more intensity so I go faster. So again, like not a lot of breakup in here. It's gonna be basically like driven just by the displacement map itself, right? Instead of like combining displacement and the micro detail. So whatever we do in the displacement is going to be respect it. So for the tip of the nose, we want to make sure that you get a little bit less breakup, so it gets a little shinier at the tip. Especially like in those guys here. I mean, like at the pictures I noticed, they have you know, it's like again, like they are in the sun all the time, right? And then it seems like their skins are very bit up by the sun, and there's a lot of oil, you know, in sweat in those areas here. So I'm gonna make sure that I get that a little darker. And when you're doing like this area here, the nose, try not to go too high with it. Try to keep like the oil a little bit more concentrated around the tip, and then you can add a little bit on, you know, sides and going up as well, but very gradually. You know, it's like you keep like this area here, the one that has most of it, and then you can actually exaggerate the T-zone, which is like the forehead in here. So I'm gonna just basically, like if I'm painting dark, again, I'm reducing the height of the micro bump, and that's going to make things shinier. So you see, like, it's a very simple map, right? You can get away with like 1 million polygons. They even need to subdivide too much. This is just to control by large areas. So let's do this a little bit more in the chin, a little bit more shiny around the chin. And this map, we can start playing with it, and then we can tweak it as we go. So I'm gonna add a little bit more, almost like black, especially like in the inner parts of the eyelids, because remember, we're gonna get this area here very, very wet. So it's a combination of what we are getting from the eye itself, like the shader, and then as it migrates towards the eyelids, we're gonna have to see a little bit of that wetness in there. And again, like I'm gonna be painting it here blindly, right? Because I have an idea about what I'm doing, but unless I see renders to see how far I should go with it, then there's no way for me to know exactly what's gonna happen, right? So as soon as I plug this one and we do a few renders, I can tell like, okay, maybe I went too far with that. I can actually bring it back and keep more in the inner part. Or I can just say like, okay, well, I think I can go shinier in those areas. And obviously, like, it's gonna be heavily dependent on your displacement maps as well, right? Because if you have a lot of breakup in your displacement map, for example, you had lots of crisscrossing in the sculpting here, naturally you're going to get much more breakup from the displacement itself. So that means you don't need to add too much from the micro breakup. I'm going to do the same here around this area. Normally, like this corner close to the caruncula here is normally a little bit more wet. So I'm going to keep it a little bit simpler and darker in there, around there. And then let's see if I can do anything else. So for the neck should be okay. I think it's not going to be too shiny. And inner ear, we're okay too. Let's see, maybe for the brows, I'm going to just remove a little bit of this area here. Just remove some of it, and I'm going to increase the breakups around here to make it a little bit less shiny, but then keep the shininess a little bit bigger in there. So something like that, you know, it's like, it's going to obviously look different from the previous one I had, which was this one here. Let's see, this one, right? I had like, you know, it's like I actually kept quite shiny in the cheeks, but I think I'm gonna trust this one this time. And then if it's too much, if it's like, if I need more shininess in there, again, it's gonna be dependent on how much breakup I have in the skin. In the case of Dick Smith, actually Stan Winston model, I had the displacement map sculpted, like the pores like we have in here, but I added a lot of that random brush on top of it. So I had the micro breakup baked into the model itself. So that's why I probably removed some of that from the cheeks, you know, which is not the case here. But then it's, again, like it's gonna have to be like a matter of like playing together with those maps. So if I end up adding more micro displacement or micro breakup in the model itself, like by sculpting with the random brush, then I'm probably gonna have to add some more spec in this area here, right? So I'm gonna have to go darker. So it's always like, you know, it's like it's always like constantly rendering stuff and checking how all those maps are playing together. It's gonna be a combination of the displacement map plus the bump height and plus the specular map, how they are playing together. And then once you get to that ballpark, then it's just easy to just like tweak it, you know, and you start getting like better results kind of straight away. So now we have this guy here. Let's do an experiment. Let's just export these maps here and see how they look like. So yeah, this mod is going like all the way to, oh, it's just like 1.1 million. Okay, so I don't need to go higher than that. So to export the maps, you don't need to do that whole fancy thing about exporting the base mesh and blah, blah, blah. You export like straight away from here, right? So I'm just gonna go to the plugin. I have the name already, bump height, right? So we're gonna just go to plugin and then turn off displacement, turn on texture from PolyPaint. By default, ZBrush should actually crank this to 100%, but I always do this. I think it's a superstition, I guess. But I crank it in here, because in the past, I think like when you baked, it would take in consideration the intensity, but I think now it's just like it automatically set to 100%, so should be fine. And then for the size of the map, again, I don't need like a 8K for those maps. I can use like, probably leave even a 2K, I would get away with it, but I'm gonna use like a 4K. I don't need switch morph target. I'm gonna keep in there, but I don't need it. Let's just turn it off altogether. And then for the color itself, I mean, all this stuff is gonna be, for the displacement settings, not gonna be taken into account anyway. So it's gonna just export the texture itself. So that's all I need, like texture from PolyPaint and then the size, and that's basically it, right? Make sure that your file names, you have everything set to 16. 16 and 8 to TIFF, right? So they are TIFFs. And you dim here, right? But that's just like a one-time setting. You probably already did it. So let's create those maps at 4K, and should be pretty fast, I think. So let's do bump height, source images. Let's do it. Let's see, that goes one map, done. Next one, done. It should take just a few seconds to do the whole thing. And even for the other ones, you know, it's like if you're exporting, even like the HD version of it, it's gonna take a little longer than this, but it's not by much. It's still gonna be in the seconds, you know, instead of minutes. So that's all we needed, 42 seconds. We exported all the maps. So let's go to my Maya file. And this is the shader that we were working on yesterday. But what we're gonna do, we're gonna have just to switch to that test shader that we were using yesterday, which was, let's see if it's here, stand, native, blah, 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 base mesh, default material. Which one is that? I thought I named it. Skin. If it's not, then we can create another one, but I thought I had it saved in here. I even put a name in there. Oh, right, this one, base shade. So base shader test, right? So this one here is that basic shader that I created. That was this AI standard surface we created yesterday. And the only thing that it has in it, it should have the cell noise plugged to it, right? So let's see if that's true. So yeah, the cell noise is plugged to it. Let's make it bigger. You guys are not seeing anything there. So that's right there. So cell noise, and then I don't have any displacement map plugged to it. Actually, I do have the displacement here. So let's remove the displacement for now. So just like click this guy here, select this guy, and then go to graph input and output. So now I can see the displacement map in there. I'm just gonna disconnect it. So I'm just gonna click this one, delete it. So now I don't have the displacement map plugged to it. So now let's just select my model and then right click here and then assign to the model. And then let's do a little quick render test. Let's make sure that I am not actually subdividing the mesh so it goes faster. So I'm gonna click the model itself, Control A, go to the attribute editor, And then I'm gonna turn off my subdivision here. Or I can just like switch to 1 or something like that. That's fine too. And then let's render it and see what we get. That's the model right there. And you should have just the micro breakup. Let's see, this one has an HDRI plug to it. So it might not be the most ideal way to see the detail. So let's just turn off that. Let's go to my outliner, turn off my dome light, and I'm just gonna increase the intensity of my, softbox. So let's go to intensity 6. Okay. And let's get to the side, maybe around here. So we can actually see what we are doing. So let's try that. Let's see if we can recognize the little micro breakup. Yeah, so we have a little cell, bump map in there, right, that we plugged yesterday. So now let's see how the new map is gonna affect this, right? I think the best way is to actually see an area that has a contrast, for example, like between the lips and the muzzle, right? So if we do a render of that, let's see what happens. So right now we don't have anything plugged in there. So you should see everything with breakup. So like, let's get this area here. So yeah, I have like the micro little bumps in there all the way across, including the lips, right? So let's plug those maps in here and see what happens. Let's get this to the side and then bring this one up. So let's go to that bump node, this one here. And you see that the bump depth we have right now, it's just, it's there and there's nothing plugged to it, right? We just plug the cell shader, the cell noise straight to the bump value, but we don't have anything plugged in here. So let's plug the map in here, or the maps. So I'm gonna click the little checker, then go to File, turn off my filter. Let's actually use this little tab in here so I can actually see all the details. Go to the Arnold tab. I'm gonna turn off my TX textures. Again, it's gonna be up to you guys if you wanna use it. And then I'm just gonna click this guy and then import my maps. So the bump height is in there. I can click any of them if they're part of the same family. And as long as I click the UV tiling mode and I switch to UDIM. So he already picked the 5 files for me and switched the 1005 to UDIM tag. So that means he recognized it. So the thing that we're gonna be doing here, it's gonna be a little bit different for this map, is that if I go to this guy here and I look at the map properties, when you're dealing with black and white maps, you normally have to switch to alpha's luminance in here. So if you're using color, it's fine. You just treat the way you have it. But if you're using like a black and white map, you switch to alpha's luminance. That means that's just going to consider the luminance of the file, right? With the blacks and whites. So let's just render without that first, and let's see if we get anything here. So you see, I still have like the map all over the place. I still see like, you know, it's like the bumps in the lips and everything. So let's switch the alpha's luminance in here. So now I start seeing a little bit of a different result. So I don't see the bump in the lips anymore. And let's see if it starts showing. Yeah, I see a little bit in this area here. So I see a little bit of it, but not too much in there. So now we can play actually with some values in here. For example, like you can use the exposure. So if I bring it down here, let's see what happens. Like if I bring up, actually let's bring up. So if I crank it, let's see what's gonna happen. So I start seeing a little bit here in the lips, and it starts getting a little bit much more bumpier around there, right? So that means that I can play with exposure if I'm not seeing anything. Sometimes that can happen depending on how you're painting your map in ZBrush. sometimes if the contrast between the light and the dark tones is not showing that much, the best way is to actually crank the exposure, you know. There are a couple of maps I painted in the past that I had to crank as far as like 5 to be able to see anything. But in this case here, we got a good amount of contrast in there. So if I crank to 5, I'm gonna start seeing the bumps in the lips again. So I think around 1 in here, it's kind of like working fine for me. And in this case here, let's switch to some other areas. Let's just move this around. I see that my lips now don't have a lot of the bumps. It's just like very minor, right? And then let's see around those areas here, for example. Let's just travel a little bit around maybe the nose. Let's see if you're getting, yeah, actually the tip of the nose, right? We should get less of it and get more shine to it. Actually, another thing we can do is to actually increase the specular so we know what we're doing in there. Click the model, and then let's just increase the spec overall. I reduced yesterday from 0.800 to 0.5, so let's just increase again. I can actually see it. Like the value I had was like 1.850 here, so let's do that. And let's see how this resolves. So this one is basically like, it's just the extra detail in between the displacement map, right? All the pores and all that stuff is gonna be coming from the displacement, all the wrinkles. But then this guy here is only gonna break up things further to help to generate that little sparkly specular around the skin. If the contrast is not too high, what I can do in ZBrush, I can actually amplify that contrast, right? Like really get a little bit darker around the tip of the nose, and then you know, depending on how I'm gonna be obviously wanting this. So around the tip of the nose now, it's a little bit more plasticky. So I could go further and just like paint even darker in there. But I think it's a good ballpark for us to start. And then around here, I got plenty of bumps in there, which is really cool. I have to play with the scale as well. If I notice that, you know, it's like the bumps are too small or too big, I can actually play with the scale. There are all those parameters in the cell node that you can actually play with, right? And then let's just stop this and let's plug our displacement here. Let's see what happens. I like to test like those things without the displacement first, and then plug in later. But yeah, so let's do this. So displacement map right here. So I'm just gonna click this guy and then drop in there. So now I connect it, and then let's try it again. And then to make sure that I'm gonna be rendering with subdivision, I'm gonna click Control A again, and then go to my attributes, like the second tab, Arnold, and then just return this to subdivision 4. So let's see that. So this point here, let's just click View and then Store a Snapshot. So now I have it stored in there, so I can use it as a comparison. And then let's just render it again. And if it doesn't render, I have to update the scene, right? And to update the scene is basically like under Render, Update Full Scene. And then it actually reloads all the maps and forces Arnold to refresh things. So if something goes wrong, we can always do that. It's loading the files. And then once this one's done, we're gonna be doing a little bit of the specular painting as well. And showing like how I actually paint them, you know, it's like it's not complicated at all. It's just like really using just like spray, lots of spray. So let's see, like at this point here, obviously, we don't have a lot of stuff plugged, right? It's just have an idea about how things are turning out. And I don't have this area here complete with all the displacements and the micro, you know, it's like wrinkles I went sculpting those areas and everything. But just to have an idea how this is gonna look like. Let's see if the nose is gonna have, maybe my UVs are not good enough for nose pores just yet, because remember I have to correct my UVs at this point. They're probably a little stretched because they came from another model. So I might have to do that next, but let's see. Yeah, that's working. Interesting, it's not showing any of my displacement for the nose. I wonder if I have the UDIM set to show everything. Let's see. So if we go here to displacement material, let's go back to my map. Yeah, it found all the tiles in there. That's interesting. That's not showing the, I thought I had more detail in the nose. Let's see if I want a little bit more for distance like that. Unless this is not the latest, maybe this is not the latest map. Oh, it's quite possible. Look, I don't think this is the latest map. That's why. So let's switch back here to the latest maps and make sure I have them plugged. So I think this is the very first. Yeah, this is the very first version. That's why. So let's get the version 2. And that now should have the pores in the nose and some of the wrinkles as well in the eye bags, right? So let's do that again. Got concerned for a bit because I thought I had a little bit more detail in some of those areas. It's cool to have like a scene set up like from the get-go you can just play with, because it's just like you just start iterating in it. It was like just look at the references and it was like, okay, what's missing here? Are the pores, you know, it's like too big or too pronounced, you know, so I can do them. Oh, now we got plenty of stuff in the nose in there. And some of the, yeah, the wrinkles in the eyes as well, which is cool. Yeah, so that's cool. I'm gonna be able to see some stuff. Still a little simple in this area, but eventually we're gonna get, oh, especially after I correct those UVs, I should get a little bit more of more resolution to those things, right? If you want to see things more a little bit sharper as well in the render, what you can do, you can always bring this value down right here. So you go to your render properties, this guy here. And then if you go to your filter, I'm at 1.5 here. If you switch to like 1.2, for example, you're gonna get the detail sharper. But at sometimes, you know, it's like at some point when you get like too sharp with detail, then it starts getting a little bit fake, you know? It's like it doesn't look like an organic kind of skin. It becomes a little bit more, you know, kind of like industrial kind of feel to it. So yeah, but for now, for this test here, we can tell that things are working. For example, like around the cheeks in here, I don't see a lot of specular, right? Because remember now that we have a micro bump height map controlling how things are breaking up in there. So it's eliminating a lot of the spec. And then in this area here, I'm getting the spec that I want, especially around there, right? Same should be happening for the lips. So around there, you're gonna see more of the shininess for it. So that starts, you know, it's like I can see that things are playing together nicely. Obviously, now that we're gonna be playing with specular map, it's gonna be another layer of things we're gonna be adding to it. Because right now, the specular is completely plasticky, right? There's no variation. Everything is like completely even. And the only thing controlling the spec is basically the micro displacement or micro bump. But once we have that controlled, it's gonna be better. And you see, like yesterday, the question was, okay, you have all this detail sculpted in your model right now, but then you say that you're still working on the model, right? Is it gonna work, or is it gonna get like, you know, too destroyed? And you see, I basically like changed the face quite a lot in terms of proportion yesterday, like increasing the size of the jaw and all that stuff, so the face looks longer now. I changed the volume of the cheekbones as well, quite a lot. but I did in a very careful way. Like I said before, you know, it's like if you want to do that, it's at this point when you have a lot of detail already, just imagine that you're working with some blend shapes for, you know, for animation. You have to do carefully, you know, it's like you pull things with a broad shape, like a broad move brush. And then if you do that way carefully, then you should be fine. You know, it's like you see like the pores are still behaving pretty well. They might be a tiny little bit more stretched than before, but like very minor, you know, considering like how much you stretched this whole area here. So it works just fine. So I think that's good for a testing here. I can tell things are starting to work, right? I need a lot more detail around the eye bag and everything, but you know, things are starting to work. So let's work a little bit on our specular map. So let's do view and then store snapshot again. So I have a little reference in there. Let's save this file for now. Render test number 4. Cool. And then let's play with this place with a specular map. So for the spec, I mean, like that's basically like we painted in what, like 10 minutes, right? It was super fast to paint. So this map here, not a lot of mystery. Like I said before, it's going to be trial and error to see how it plays out in your renders. But the most important thing to observe that I mentioned before is that you you switch. Let's see, render. Blah, 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 blah. Where is it? The geometry. The only thing you like, the most important thing to observe here, it's basically, oh, it's my bump. That's weird. Why is it not showing? Did I use the wrong node? Because it seems like it was working, but for some reason it's not showing there. Let's see what's happening here. Let's see if I'm actually using the correct node. So that's my bump height. Let's just bring this one back here. Graph input and output. And then, yeah, it's weird because it's plugged in here. But then when I click the model itself, it seems like it's not finding it. It's going to some other node. Why the bump depth here shows like a 0.050, but for some reason when I click in here, it shows correctly that I have like my bump height plugged. And in the renders it's working fine too. So I'm gonna ignore it, but it's weird to me that's showing differently when I click the model and then go here. It's weird. Anyway, so that's plugged in there. So like I was saying before, if you go here and then you look like the things that we changed here, the most important part is to make sure that if you're not seeing any result, right? Like you just plugged your map and you're not seeing like anything happening differently, like the lips and the rest of the skin are all the same, make sure that you have alpha as luminous, right? And make sure that if you crank the exposure, things start showing up more, you know? Sometimes, like I said, if you don't have enough contrast in your model in there in ZBrush, in the colors, sometimes you have to crank the exposure quite a bit in here. But in this case, I cranked just like from 0 to 1 and that worked. So that's the main thing about it. So let's look at the specular map now. The specular map, what I'm gonna do here, just to be safe, because this one I know it works, I'm gonna be painting just to show you the technique, but I'm gonna be using this exact map that I already have in here because I know this one works. And then obviously you can use as a visual reference, but remembering that your model is going to be dependent on the detail you have sculpted, right? This is specular map is going to work for my own model because I know how things are sculpted. I don't have a ton of micro breakups around this area, you know, the lips as well. I don't have breakups in there, so I know I don't need to go like too heavy with the specular, so that's why I don't go like super white in here. I have more white around the contact, you know, between the lips in there, because I want to keep that area a little bit more shiny, kind of like almost like a saliva. You can even add some micro bubbles if you want with you know, geometry later on, if you want to do that. But I'm just going to show you how I paint this type of texture here, which is very simple. It's always using like very simple spray brushes. And the spray brush I'm going to be using here is the same I'm going to be using for the color painting, which is going to be something similar to this, right? And then obviously this one like looks a little funny because it's matching an old model. But yeah, at least we have an idea about like some greens and yellows and other things that I have in there. The tendency is normally when you're painting skin is to keep everything very on the pink side of things. But there are like lots of greens and oranges and whites and purples, magentas and stuff like that, you know, that you use to actually break up that impression that everything is it's so even, right? So it's important to add more of that. But we are not going to be painting any color today. It's going to be just a spec. So let's go do the same thing. I'm going to click the head, highest resolution, just duplicate it. And instantly I'm going to rename this one to spec or just specular. And I can put a number here, just make sure it's the first iteration. And then I'm going to do the same thing. So if flat color is not working for me, I know that's because the material is baked into it. So I just switch to material, and then I'm just gonna fill the object. Now it's baked and actually unbaked, right? Now all the other materials should work. And let's switch to skin shader as we normally do. And let's start with a medium color. So if you're talking about specular, you can start with a level of gray, something like that. That's kind of like the overall spec. Again, it's going to be playing with a micro bump, right? So it's going to be broken down even further depending on how you have the micro bump height set up. So just going to click that one and then switch to RGB 100%. And I'm going to color fill object. It's always hard for you guys to see in there, so I'm going to make it a little bit lighter. So let's do this again. Color fill object a little bit better. And or we can go full black maybe and then just bring it up. Let's do that. Let's do darker and just gonna it's easier for you to see when I paint with white, I think. So let's do a little darker and then just start bringing those tones up. So the brush that I use here, I have this guy set up. Let's say skin color spray. I have like 2 of them here, so 1 and 2. So let's try with the first one. Okay, the first one. So basically this is the standard brush. And then what I have in here set up is basically like the flow is set to 0. Remember, like if you set the flow to 0, that means like each one of the little specks is gonna be more far apart, right? Have very low flow. And the placement is pretty high at 1. So that means things are gonna be very spread. And then for the alpha itself, you can pick like one of those 35, 6, or 7. So, you know, one of those. I think I'm using 37. Actually, not 37. I noticed that it just changed. So maybe like 35. Not even that. I wonder which one. 36. Not that either. Well, I'm going to keep 36. I think 36 is a good one. And then for the alpha adjustment, I have a little bit pulled in here. I'm just going to keep a little bit more like normal, like the default. You can even reset it in here just because I got an alpha that's a little bit smaller. And then, so if I spray this, let's go like with the full on intensity here so you can see what we are doing. And then let's switch to white. So you're gonna see this type of spec, right? So because it's a very low flow, right? If by default is 0.5, right? It creates it's a much bigger flow. So 0.5 plus the placement here, I think is 0.5 by default as well. Or flow is at 1, something like that. It's like it paints something like this, you know, by default. So it's like it's a lot of dots, right? So I'm gonna bring the flow down. I'm gonna bring the displacement up, the placement up, and then the color I'm gonna bring to 0, because one thing that happens is that if you have 2 colors in here and you have alternate turned on, what happens is it tries to mix 2 colors, right? So basically, like if you have this color here at 0.5 or even at 1, for example, see when I paint it, it's going to create like some dots going to be dark and some going to be white, but I don't want that. So I'm going to click the color going to bring out everything to 0. So it's going to be 0, 0, and 1 in here, and scale is going to be a 1, and that's about it. So depending on the type of alpha you're going to pick, for example, if I'm doing something like this, right, I'm getting all those dots like that. Obviously, if you click an alpha that's like already has dots in it, for example, alpha 7 in here, then you're gonna get like a lot of dots, right? You can use that kind of stuff as well. But in this case here, you're gonna do stuff pretty spread out. So I'm gonna use my alpha 36 in there. And then to create depth in the specular is gonna be a combination of size and intensity, right? So what I'm gonna do, like the first pass I'm gonna create something that has less intensity. So let's say like 10, for example. And then I have my set to white completely. And then with 10, let me switch to my material to flat so you can actually see what I'm doing. So at 10, I'm gonna get this very broad, I'm gonna make even bigger. Very broad spec like that. It's just like some big variation to it. Right, so, and I'm painting at 1.1 million here. I can actually subdivide this mesh one more time because the spec I need to have a little bit more resolution. So I'm gonna Control D, subdivide it. Now I have 4.4 million. So this should be better. So let's get, add some of those big specs like that with a low intensity, right? I'm not going crazy with intensity just yet. And as I go smaller, I'm gonna increase the intensity of my brush as well. And that's gonna add a lot of depth to the texture. So let's do this. And then when I get to the middle area here, I'm just switch my symmetry off. Get to this middle area here. Then obviously they're gonna have to observe the T-zone and all that stuff, right? But for now, so now I'm still using the same intensity, but the size of it is a little bit smaller, right? So I'm gonna add a little layer of complexity to it. And then you're gonna go like layer by layer. For example, like you're gonna add like little passes like this with low intensity. And you're gonna be combining with a smaller brush and then a higher intensity as I go. So let's switch to symmetry again, which is X, right? So just press X. And then now I'm gonna start studying, okay, where I need to go with more detail, right? So I can actually go, for example, let's go to an area like, let's start with the nose. So now I can actually crank my RGB intensity here, like 25 or something like that. I'm gonna go smaller. I'm gonna turn off my symmetry. And then if it's like too much, actually, you know, it's like if it's too spread out, I can actually tweak this one, right? Like I can bring the flow a little bit higher. So I get a little bit more of them concentrated in one spot. And again, I'm gonna be painting, gonna be using the pressure of my tablet as well. Add an extra layer like that. It's already a little bit smaller and a little bit more, stronger. And then I'm gonna do the same for all those other areas here in the T-zone, right? Especially like the chin and stuff like that. Always using spray. The entire thing is gonna be painted with spray. And then around here as well. And then you're gonna start like going like smaller and smaller. And then basically like higher and higher with your intensity. So I'm gonna get like, sometimes I can even like bring my alpha and make it a little bit tighter. So for example, like bring this curve here a little smaller. So now when I paint, I get like smaller specs like that. And I'm gonna go like higher with intensity. And you know, it's like, again, like around the nose, I'm gonna paint like that, like those tiny little specks. And you see like all the things that we just did right now, for example, like adding those layers of very broad specs, like the big ones, with, you know, with like less intensity, and bringing things like one by one, layer by layer, you add depth to it, you know. It's like, so now when you look at it, it's almost like you can see like different depths of spec in there. It's almost like, it becomes kind of like three-dimensional, the map, you know. So it's the best way to do it, I think. And then basically like this, what I'm doing here, you're gonna keep repeating until you get to something that, in my case here for this model, I got like very, very white like that, right? But again, like it all depends how you have your map plugged in Maya and how you're gonna crank the exposure in there. For example, if I have something like this, maybe the exposure gonna have to bring it down, you know, to be able to see things. So I use a lot of Maya own stuff to actually correct things, you know. I actually are gonna go further with this painting here. I'm gonna paint a brand new specular map. I think like to conform to that model better. But for today, I'm just like showing you guys how to do it, and I'm showing that this one is the one that's working for me. So I'm gonna try to find something that's kind of like an in between, you know, something that's not as white like this. It has more control. It's not too stretched out, right? It has some stretching going on in here. And then I can show you a comparison tomorrow what I got in relation to this one and the new one, right? Because I'm gonna have to keep painting by hand this entire thing, and I don't want to spend the whole lesson doing this, you know. Basically, what I show you guys is exactly how I paint things, and this is gonna be used for the color painting as well. A lot of spray like that, and it's always using the same principle. You start like broad and very small intensity, and you go and build up until you get like smaller and smaller, and then, you know, more and more intense. Basically, that's going to be the whole thing. So let's, for now, let's just bring this model in here, this map, and let's export them as a specular. So specular one. Actually, I already have one in there with the same name. Good thing that ZBrush accepts it, unlike Maya. So let's do this, just export the texture again. At 496 is fine. So specular. And then it should take, again, like another 40 seconds. Do you guys have any questions about it? That time we can talk about it. Oh, and by the way, if you guys have any requests about the licenses, remember, I still have probably like 24, 25 licenses for ZWrap if you need it. Just send me an email or like a private message on Facebook, because I'm sending on demand. You know, I'm attaching to emails and sending to people, and I have to keep track of the numbers because I cannot give the same number to two people. So that's why I'm doing that way.
Hey, Chris, question. If you have to actually, let's say, something between your models, change your UVs, how do you, and then you can't just import, I don't know, or your topology change and you can't just import one model into the other model. How would you import the maps in?
Yeah, I mean, like at some point, you're going to have your topology locked, right? The topology cannot change anymore.
Yeah, I mean, like between, because like now you're importing between projects, right? Because you're using the same mesh.
Yes.
But if you were to import into the same, like into another model, but you didn't have it, let's say the UVs are the same, but
but you changed something in the topology.
Yeah, like you wouldn't just like jump into the same guy. Would you just bring it in and kind of bring it close enough and project?
Yeah,
or you would try to bring the maps like somehow and importing by UDIM, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, like for example, if you have the UVs in the exact same spot, right, but the topology is different, you can use Maya to actually just like conform one model to the other one perfectly, right? And then you can bring it to ZBrush, like you said, you know, it's like subdivided, and just like project one to another one. Or in this case, you can use the ZWrap, right? Like just make sure that the model conforms to the other one and project. But yeah, in my case here, because I'm using the same topology, for me it's easier. I could just like swap the models, and then if I change anything in the UVs, then I can just like re-import the base mesh and get it done, right?
All right, but if you actually have to import maps into ZBrush, into your UDIMs, how do you do it?
Maps into ZBrush. What do you mean? Like if you have?
I mean, like let's say you retouched some map outside of ZBrush.
Okay.
Then you want to bring it in.
Okay, so if you already have everything set, for example, I would say make sure that you have your poly groups all set, right?
Yeah.
Matching the maps and everything. So what you're gonna have to do, for example, if you have stuff in HD, for example, right?
Is that you have to like select each UDIM and load it in one by one?
Yes, Pretty much.
All right, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. You're gonna have to hide everything but that specific UDIM, and
Yeah.
just like go to your to the map channel and then import one by one and bake it. Transfer color to polypaint, and that's it. You're gonna have to do one by one.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I just wonder if you had like, I don't know, some other ninja way of doing it.
No, I actually don't. I wish they had like a way to import like a set of UDIMs and
I
do this
know.
out and do this automatically. I'm pretty sure like it's very scriptable. You can, if you know how to do it, because it
Yeah,
should,
you can do it with like a very shitty macro,
yeah,
but like it doesn't really work because it's kind of like it it records where you clicked it on the screen. That's how the macro works.
Oh yeah.
If you change models, then it doesn't work, which is like super dumb.
Yeah, I mean,
Instead of
like
like,
I took a look at the language at some point. I actually built a few plugins for ILM actually, but like very, very basic ones. Just by looking at the language itself, they have like lots of, there is an external library. It's a DLL for ZBrush that you have access to a lot of stuff. You can actually have access to folders and files and do lots of different transactions with it. So I'm pretty sure there are things in there you can actually use to automate the whole thing and build the entire plugin in it, But it's just
yeah, I know some studios have it, and because I guess somebody did it.
yeah.
But mostly it's, and then like you need a special language because apparently like plugins like I don't know, let's say Noisemaker, like that plugin, even though it's right there, like it actually doesn't speak.
Oh yeah, it's
the
probably
same
like an
language.
external. Yeah, it's probably like building another language, and it's just like
Converted or something. I'm not sure.
incorporated in there. Basically, like I think there's a button to launch it. Basically, from that point on, it's just a different language, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, I was just wondering that, but cool, man.
Thank you. No problem. So let's do this. So now let's plug our specular map. And so we have this guys here. Let's click the base shader. And then right here at the specular color, so I'm going to plug my map in there. So I'm going to keep the intensity at the weight's going to be at 800. I'm going to click the color and then file, turn off. Again, like it doesn't show all the nodes in here. Going to have to go here. Go to turn off my auto generate TX textures, and then select my the specular map right there. So you can see like those are the maps we just exported. Let's bring this up. You see like has the nose from Stan Winston still. So my UVs are still pretty much Stan Winston UVs. And then that's plugged. So now if you render, let's see what happens. So we have this one, it's already saved as a reference. So let's see if we just like do a quick render here. So eliminate a little bit of the nose spec already. But another thing we have to remember is that we have to tweak this map, right? Like to conform to the intensity that we want to represent in here. So that's gonna be by tweaking the node itself, right? So let's just go to the side here, bring this guy to the side right there. And then go check the nodes of this one we just plugged. So basically like where is it? Base shade, the specular. So I have my specular plugged in there, and I have my roughness at 0.348. Let's see what I had for my wife's model. So the roughness was very low, and the weight was like at 0.6. So I definitely treated differently that model. But I actually like the skin on Stan better, so that's why I'm kind of like going back to it. No, that's not the Stan skin, is it? Oh yeah, that's the Stan skin. So let's try to kind of reproduce what we have in there. So the specular I had, was it just 400? That's interesting. And the roughness was only 120. Let's do that. Let's try that. Just to make sure, I'm gonna bring this shader back here, like a brand new one, because I want to make sure we are using the correct values for Stan Winston. So I have the, let's see, scenes. No, where did I save it? I think it was inside of Stan Winston. right here, and then scenes, and this one's gonna be Maya scenes. Clean scene. No, I think it was under this guy here, Native American scenes. Yeah, thin skin only. Okay, let's get that one. Okay, so now I got like this big shader here. So let's see how it compares. So yeah, the roughness I had at 120. So let's match this one. So it was 850 here and 120. So let's remember that. And then for the specular itself, the map I had plugged, let's see how my alpha was here. Actually, I was not using alpha as luminance for this one. And everything else seemed pretty vanilla in default. Effects, nothing. Okay, so that should be easy enough. So let's just to confirm here. So it's like 120 and then 850. So let's match this one. Man, it's not switching. That's weird. So Maya sometimes does that. It's not switching to the other model. Let's click the node itself here. Yeah, seems like it's what I had. That's so bizarre. Because I'm clicking here now and it's actually obeying that. Okay, 120 and then 850. Okay, so that's what we're going to be using. And then seems like the spec is quite high in there, but it might be okay actually. One thing you can do, you can actually go to the color, right? And then where you have the map plugged now, that's the specular here, you can always play with the exposure, right? So for example, you have that rendering right there. Let's go Maya, the little render. You can always like play with exposure, you know, so I can see if that helps. So let's see. Sometimes Maya gets into this mode that it just kind of stops rendering and then like loads stuff to memory again and then starts again. But it's so weird because we're just rendering and we didn't change a lot of stuff in there and then all of a sudden gets stuck for a few seconds. I don't know what's the deal. Still thinking about, oh, there you go. Finally started. So here, the exposure, let's see if I change it. Then it basically like eliminated all the specular from there, right? If I crank it here, oh, look what's happening. It's actually not taking the whole thing, right? That means I don't have my UDIM on. So let's turn this on. So UDIM Mari. Okay, now it's actually working for everything. Interesting that the alpha's luminous is not gonna make a difference here. Let's see if it actually makes a difference. Yeah, doesn't seem like it's doing a lot. Come on, Maya. Got stuck again. Yeah, it seems like the alpha's luminous in this case here is not doing a lot of, it's not making things very, very different here. Actually, there's a little bit of it that's happening around there. I think under the nose, I see there's a difference. Let's see if I turn it on, if it actually goes away. Oh, I think it's kind of the same. Yeah, there's a big reflection happening right underneath the nose right there. It's because I have the exposure cranked all the way to 3 here. Let's go back to my 0. Then I should get just enough. Let's see the rest here, how the nose behaves now. Yeah, that's cool. Okay. So now that I see that this is working here, so I have my specular map, I have the micro bump, the bump height as well that's plugged in there. So we have like 2 maps and then a procedural assigned, actually 3 maps with the displacement, right? So displacement, specular, bump height, and then the procedural, which is the cell noise, the alligator stuff for the micro breakup. So we have a couple of maps plugged, it's rendering already. And then I think we can switch to our skin shader again. and see how those things are playing with the skin shader. Obviously, there's no color variation or anything, so everything's going to look pretty much like silicone mask, right? But at least we have an idea about it. So Stan Skin 2, let's see what we have here. Let's switch to the new Stan Winston skin, which is this one here I just plugged. And let's just eliminate the color itself. Let's click this one, and then let's see where the new one is, base shader. So let's just get this one and this one. Basically what I'm selecting here is like Stan Winston, the Stan Skin, the new one, and then the base shader. So I'm just gonna do this so I can actually compare the two and copy some of the parameters from one to another one. So basically, so if I have my base shader, I don't want to test it anymore. I think it's in a good spot. I can create a new one if I want to test. I want to actually recreate this shader here. So what I can do, I can click my Stan Winston shader in there, and then just like click copy tab. So I'm gonna keep this one floating. So it's gonna be easy for me to just like copy those values to the other one. So I'm gonna click my base shader right here. And then now I'm gonna copy from this tab to that tab right there. So the base is not gonna be important, right? We already talked about that. I already have those values copied in there. I'm just gonna put this one a little bit more specky right there. So those ones already transferred. Transmission is not gonna be important because we don't have anything going on. The subsurface are gonna be copying from that one to this one, which is gonna be 1. And then if you want to copy this color to here, you can just click the color, and then it should store to the last spot right there, right? So now if I click this one here, this one, it should be there. So that's the color. This is going to be 0.120. This is going to be random walk 2, and this is going to be 0.1.5. And then I have to plug the color, but in this case here we don't have a color to plug just yet, right? We're going to be painting the albedo later. Now, if you want to see, you know, it's like how you would look like with an albedo, we can actually plug as a test. But let's not do this in the first test. Let's just do this in the second one. There is one thing we forgot to plug, which is the coat. So the coat is basically like it's the same specular map, adding a secondary kind of spec to the entire thing. So let's copy those values in here. So I'm going to be using roughness at 4. So basically like it goes from 0.120, which is the very tight spec, right, to 400, which is like kind of broad spec, 0.155. And then for the color, we have basically like the same color. And then for the map itself, let's see what we have. We have like the exposure cranked all the way to 2. And in this case here, we are using alpha as luminous. So let's just copy this. Everything else is pretty much the same. So 2 and alpha luminous. So let's go back, click this guy here. And let's do the same thing. So coat is going to be, let's just open my shader network right here. And then let's see what we have plugged right now. So we have the bump height and we have the specular in here. So I'm going to just click the specular itself and I'm going to just press Control D. Right, so I create a copy of it. And now if I click the main shader node, I can just drag this one into my coat. So from here to weight, right? So now it's a copy. I did as a copy because I want to have basically like a separate control for it, right? So what I'm going to do with it, let's click specular here, and let's make sure I have everything plugged correctly. So alpha is luminous as well, and then exposure going to crank to 2. Just like I have in the other one. And then now, let's see if we render this, we should be able to see a different result with some color. Actually, I need to add some color as well, right? For the subsurface scattering. Because we don't have any maps plugged, let's plug like a generic dark color like that. And then let's just save this one. store snapshot. And then let's do another render here and see what we get. This should be pretty much like a silicon mask at this point, right? And don't worry about like, you know, it's like I'm just like throwing all those numbers at you guys right now. But from time to time, as we plug more and more maps, I'm gonna be actually breaking down and reviewing the whole thing. And there's one point I'm gonna be showing like the entire shader network, like as we stand, like node by node, okay, what's plugged in there, how the maps are set one by one. So, you know, I'm trying to give you like the play-by-play stuff, but if you're not catching it right now, don't worry too much, because there is definitely a time we're gonna be talking about each one of the nodes after everything's plugged. So now what we are seeing here, it's a more interesting result, because instead of just having that boring plain specular map, right? We have the specular map plus the coat. And the coat is the one that's making this nice broad spec happen around, especially in the cheeks in here. Remember when we had the tight spec? We are getting the tiny little ones from the micro displacement or micro bump, but we are not getting like the nice broad oily areas. And this one is coming from the coat itself, right? This is very cool for areas like the forehead, for example. When I was looking, when I was rendering this guy here, it's like my old work in there. So let's see, personal, stand is done. Stand is done. And then images. I have probably like 6 hard drives plugged, and it kind of goes to sleep. And then, but for example, like the forehead stuff, when I was doing those renders with, let's see one that shows it better. Maybe this one. When I was doing those renders with the spotlight, right, like with the flashlight, this kind of result in here that I'm seeing here in the forehead, I was not seeing it until I start plugging the coat. And then the coat is the one that's actually adding this very broad spec, and it adds a lot of life to it. You know, it's like otherwise you're gonna get stuck to just like a very simple plasticky kind of specular type of thing. But that broad one really brings things to life. You know, it's like I think it really adds a lot to it. So it's basically like I'm using a very tight 0.120 for the spec and 0.400 for the broad specular. And that's what we're gonna bring this stuff to life, you know. So if let's just like stop this one. I'm gonna save this one again, store, so we can compare with and without the subsurface gathering, right? It's kind of like bringing things a little bit nicer in there. So let's see, for example, like we don't have detail in the forehead. We still have to sculpt all the pores and everything. But let's just say, let's see how this thing works without any displacement, but just with this broad spec. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about right here. Like, it's a very small source for the light, right? But you see how much it spreads out just by using the coat with the high value, like 0.400, right? So once I have this, all the pores is sculpted in that area and everything, then it's gonna look much nicer. What's happening here, you're gonna see like tiny little specks in there, and those tiny little specks are probably coming from the micro bump, right? Remember, like that the lighting is hitting, and it's basically like hitting those little spikes in the alligator texture, right? And just like reflecting in different directions, so you create all those little sparks. And then and the other thing that I have to mention is also the amount of samples I'm using to render, right? Remember I said before, this is very deceiving right now, because sometimes you think like you're getting very tight specs and you're getting all those tiny little random little spots like that. And then sometimes this is just a little artifact because you don't have enough samples to show nice and mixed specular all the way across. And to achieve that, obviously, you're going to have to crank this value here. So the camera anti-alias. Like I said before, if I'm doing like final renders, I'm going to be cranking this to around 10 all the way to sometimes 14, depending on the resolution, right? But if it's like a higher resolution, you can just keep at 10, and then, you know, it's like you should have enough. But in this case here, you see, like I see those little specks in here. And those ones, if I crank the resolution, probably like this noise is gonna go away. See, there's a lot of noise in the shadow in here as well, in the shade. So all that stuff should start going away. But what I like here is that now that we have the code plugged, we're starting to see a little bit more of a more interesting you know, story being told around this area here. Now, when it comes to the nose itself, right, we don't have a ton of stuff going on. We sculpted some of the pores in there. And then I painted maybe a little bit too much spec around this area. So slowly I'm gonna have to look at my references and see what's worth to do. You know, it's like keep more, you know, specularity around here. You know, whatever, you know, I find that I have to do. You know, it's like I can actually tweak that. One thing to observe is that you see, like I'm using like the same map, the exact same map for the specular and then for the coat. But because I'm using a duplicate, they're actually using like different settings independently. So nothing stops you guys from painting like different maps if you want to. If you want to push to the next level, right? I try to keep things like as simple as possible in my own pipeline. And basically what I do is like, there is room for improvement in everything I do. And I'm completely aware of that. But I try to use the minimum amount of maps, the minimum amount of settings and everything, and try to get the best results I can get with this very minimal amount. And then if I feel like, okay, there's something that's lacking here, I can improve. Okay, what if I break up this map here into 2 maps now, and I tweak this in a certain way, you know, and then I can add that extra layer of complexity, but just on demand. I'm not gonna go like straight away and start with a super complex shader network, and all of a sudden you don't even know where to start. You know, it's like if you have to bug track stuff, you're kind of lost because there's so many parameters being added. So that's why I try to keep everything very simple. I think from a standpoint of an artist, it's very important to keep things very simple, because not all of us have a very technical background, right? Some of us, we are much more artistic. Some of us came like from drawing or sculpting in real clay, and we don't have like this tech savvy kind of profile, right? So I think like what I provide is a very straightforward approach that's like, you know, it's simple to understand. Like there's not a lot of parameters involved in comparison to a lot of tutorials you watch out there that people just complicate things way too much. So what I'm gonna try is like to push this model with very few maps, like as far as I can. And then as soon as I hit a wall, okay, now I need to add a different map in here. And then we can do that on demand, you know. But for now, we're gonna keep things simple. And I think just with the simple steps, you guys gonna be able to already, you know, like do your renders and create something that looks cool already. And we can start iterating on top of that. Start thinking about like the lighting setup you're gonna be using for your final scene. If it's gonna be like more of like a dramatic lighting, you know, it's like a Rembrandt light, like the one we did in one of the first lessons. Or it's gonna be more like a global light, HDRI that's gonna look more realistic, right? So think about those things. And so let's just, since we were talking about HDRIs, let's see how this compares. So we have just one single light illuminating the whole thing now. So let's save this one, start snapshot, and let's switch to our HDRI here. And I'm gonna be using both at the same time. So I'm gonna use the HDRI, and my softbox now I'm gonna reduce the intensity from 6 to 4. Because now I want the HDRI to produce most of the light in here. Sometimes when you just do this kind of stuff, like especially in your Windows machine, and you switch turn on one light and then turn off the other one by hiding, sometimes or most of the time, Arnold has a hard time like finding out what just changed. So in this case here, I'm gonna go straight to render and then update full scene. And I'm gonna do that just to force Arnold to reload those lights correctly. Because sometimes you switch one off, and then when you render, it looks washed out. It looks like the shadows kind of go away. It's almost like the shadows are ignored for some reason. And then when you do the reload, the update, basically like everything starts working again. So keep that in mind. It's kind of cool to see the progress already. You know, it's like it excites me like around this time when I start seeing the pores, like, okay, I know where this is going now. There's a lot that the color, the albedo is going to bring to this, right? The albedo brings a lot of life, and it can actually make or break your model. It's very frustrating sometimes when you sculpt something and you put in a model, and then depending on the view paint artist, sometimes they really bring to the next level, and then it's like it looks awesome. And then sometimes it's someone who doesn't have it's like the best experience with painting skin tones, for example, and then it kind of like washes out stuff and then kind of kills a little bit of the effect, But since this is your own model, you're going to be dealing with the whole thing. You're going to be the one controlling, it's like how much you're going to push this. And, if you do it correctly, you're going to get very, very good results for sure. We're going to make sure like we are doing the reviews and everything. We're actually talking about like skin variation. And by that, I mean like intensity and color variation, all that stuff. And making sure that everything is not looking like it's looking right now. It's kind of like a silicone mask, right? We're going to make sure that it looks like it has, underlying structures, like the bone structure is going to have to be lighter underneath. So like the cheekbones, the cartilage of the nose, the eye bags are going to have plenty of fat tissue underneath, right? The pigmentation in the lips, which should not read like lipstick, right? They kind of like blend and fade away around the edges. So you have to make sure that you have that instead of like having like a super well-defined line. You're gonna have like a blurred line in there, right? And considering everything about the character itself, what's the background of your character? It's like in my case, I have to think about the elements. Like I was talking about the sun beating up his skin, and then the dust and all that stuff. And I'm gonna have to keep that in mind if I want to represent something that looks it has character related to the to the elements, right? Same way when you're planning a model and you're planning a model to be like a character that has like a backstory, right? I used this like in my old class when I taught like probably like 7 years ago. For example, if you look at the tennis player, right? Someone who plays tennis their whole life, they have one forearm that's definitely more developed than the other one, right? And then same with a lot of sports, right? Like those guys, like there's a guy who actually, he's a freak. I think he's from Germany. He's like an arm wrestling champion. And this guy is a skinny dude, but he has like some disease that actually, it's almost like the gigantism, right? But he has that just in one arm. So he's this guy like kind of skinny, but he has this gigantic arm and a freaking like a gigantic hand as well. And but that's because of a disease. But such an interesting character, because what that guy picked as a profession is to be a professional arm wrestler, and he goes against those gigantic guys, and he wins a lot of those battles, because he has a lot of strength in one single arm. He's like a Popeye arm, You have to search on like probably like YouTube, search for like Popeye arm wrestler or something like that, and you're gonna see this guy. Like he's a very weird looking dude. He's like skinny the whole body, but just one arm and one hand is gigantic. So it's like think about those things. Always like the background of your character. If you're sculpting a portrait, obviously the background is probably going to be an actor, right? Like someone who's But if you're sculpting someone who is into some kind of sport, then you're going to be thinking about what kind of like body development that sport drives. And in my case here is the elements, it's like it's someone under the sun, like that guy that I sculpted some time ago, Roy, which is this guy, which is like an extreme case of skin beat up by the sun, right? So I have to actually research all those super old people to see like what kind of like brain structures are created. It's like when you have like a extreme exposure to sun and age, obviously, right? So this freaky guy here. So that was an interesting exercise. I still have to finish him up, but yeah. So it's almost like I have to incorporate some of that stuff in the Native American guy, but it's that dilemma, right? Like I don't want to build yet another old guy, so I have to incorporate whatever works, but without going too crazy about it,
I got a question.
Chris,
Yeah.
was that based on a real
on real references, or was it a stylized character?
It's based on a painting. It's a painting by James Bama. Let's see if I have it here. Let's see.
Every time I saw it, I always wondered if you were using
no, it's this.
It's this a stylized take. Oh wow!
So James Bama is this amazing painter, and he died, and he used to paint lots of Native American guys, right? And this guy here is probably like a mixed race guy. It probably definitely has like the big like features, like he looks a little bit Indian, but his name was Roy. What's his last name? I don't remember. Roy. I don't remember. I have the book, and then he tells a little bit of the story about the guy. You know, kind of like a
Benzona.
Yeah, Roy Benzona. Yes, exactly, Roy Benzona. And yeah, it's very cool, man. So yeah, every time I posted this model here, I always mention that, like, hey, this is based on James Bama, because it's the kind of guy you have to give credit, because some people don't know James Bama, and they have to know him because he's way too good, you know, to be forgotten. But yeah, it's definitely based on a painting, not a. He has an awesome, actually, sanguine drawing of Roy Benzona as well. It's in the same book. And it's freaking awesome, man. Let's see if I can take the book here. Very quickly, let's see how far I can get with my phones. Let's see. The Art of James Bama. This book here. Let's see if I can see in there in the camera. The Art of James Bama. And there's a Native American right in the cover. And then if you look around, I mean, like, he only painted like Native Americans. And some of them, like, there is one that's very iconic. That's this young Native American guy wearing like a Superman t-shirt, which is showing, like, you know, it's like the mix and getting civilized, or whatever you want to call that, you know, and just like getting to the modern society, right? Like, which is kind of like a sad thing. But this based like Roy Benzona here, Old Man Wyoming, and that's the drawing right there. I don't know if you can see it. But it's a freaking amazing drawing, like with sanguine and kind of like reddish, kind of sepia color. And it's even more amazing than the painting itself. It's very, very cool. So that's kind of like my inspiration. I didn't do like a one-to-one representation, but I definitely inspired like in the whole character of the skin, you know. It's super cool. So yeah, we got the model in here, and we know that things are working now. I like the quality of the skin. I can tell that there is potential to, you know, really get this to work. And so we're gonna keep working on the detailing of things. Gonna do some work on the eyebrows area, because we still can use some of the similar pores structure. And then we're gonna be doing adding some variation in the spores around the chin area as well. So I'm just gonna pause this. Let's just save it as a reference. I like saving a ton of references. Then I'm just gonna cancel this. And I'm gonna save my scene yet again.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
I got a question. About the lighting, like for your final renders, do you typically have the HDR and then you have some supporting lights too, or does it just depend?
It depends, yeah. Sometimes I have like a single HDR doing the whole job. Sometimes I have something like this that is more controlled, right? Like it's the HDRI for the overall. And then I have a kick light from the side just to get an extra feel. And then sometimes what I do, I have like a backlight actually just adding the rim, right? Like, so it all depends of the situation, actually. I'm never satisfied with my lighting. It's always like, it's so funny because I can judge other people's lighting, but I cannot judge my own lighting. People like what I do, and they comment like, oh, your lighting looks so good, blah, blah, and I never like it. And then I look someone else that does probably like very similar thing, and I was like, oh man, that looks so cool. It's just like I have no idea how my lighting looks like. You know, it's like I have this block. It's like a mental block. So yeah, I try to do like different. Every time I post like a new render, you're gonna see like it's a different lighting probably because I keep poking around and seeing what works. And unlike normal people who actually keep track on things, like, oh, okay, like this lighting will actually look good in here, so I'm gonna save that scene. I kind of like, I never save, I don't remember. If I post something in one day, the best way for me is to track is actually go back to the same day and find out what file I saved that day. it's such a mess, man. Like, it's because I always keep like in my mind is that constant search. You know, it's like, okay, the next one is gonna look a little bit better, and sometimes I mess up. You know, it's like it's just like, okay, I like that one that I did way, you know, past, and now I don't even know how to reproduce.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, man. Like I'm very unhappy with my work constantly, so I keep like pushing and trying things, you know. And I never finish anything, as you can tell.
That's a true artist.
Yeah. But hopefully, man, like during this break, like in November and December, I really want to concentrate and pick like 2 of those portraits. Can be any one of them, and really push to the next level. You know, it's like with Stan. What bothers me about Stan is the likeness itself. There's some problems with eyes and the nose and things like that. So I want to fix the likeness, but the quality of the shaders is the one I like the best. But then, you know, my wife, for example, there's lots of problems with the likeness I have to fix and improve the shader, improve the albedo. And yeah, it's like constant, man, just like trying to get better results, you know.
Cool.
But then at the same time, we have guys here in our own class, you know, it's like doing amazing work, like work with scans, obviously, but like you know, doing amazingly realistic stuff. And I wish I could do that kind of realism, you know. It's like, but I think what I try is always like to idealize and come up with something that looks cool, but definitely like not the most realistic work you're gonna see out there for sure. There is always a little good chunk of me in everything I do. So let's see. Let's just bring the masking here. Let's do some sculpting again. So go HD again. And let's go to our little reference that we had yesterday. So let's see. Yeah, in the past, I was actually rushing those classes and trying to incorporate a ton of stuff in a single day. And then it ends up that the very last like 2 classes, two lessons, we actually don't have a ton of stuff because we covered so much. So that's why I'm taking it easy, you know, it's like in showing, for example, okay, let's do, you know, like put together like those passes, you know, it's like with the specular and stuff. And if I have the time, I do some sculpting at the end. But we definitely have time, you know, it's like to do the sculpting and go through the hair stuff and all that stuff. But obviously, because I have more experience with this stuff, because it's my own little pipeline, I'm gonna be able to do stuff faster than you guys. But definitely, like, it's the kind of class that's gonna be lingering in your brain for a little bit. So even after we finish everything, you're still gonna be catching up with some stuff. But definitely, the information is gonna be all there available for you guys. That's my intention. You know, it's like not leaving anything out. And then, you know, it's like having all the references you're going to need to finish up your project, you know, because I definitely don't want to add pressure to you guys because there's a lot of information to deal with. So let's get back to this reference right here, which is my go-to. Let's get this older guy in here. Again, like all those guys, they're white dudes, but at least we have good reference for direction of the wrinkles and things like that. So let's look around the chin itself here. Look how many cool structures they have in there. Instead of like just the boring pores that I have, there's all those little details in here I can actually incorporate to my model, right? So I'm just gonna bring this, even like this one, look how it breaks up, right? Remember we was talking about the path of least resistance? So look at how it searches for the pores in there and breaks up right there. Those ones are starting to break up right there, right? So that's what you're gonna see. You're gonna see pores trying to connect with one another and creating those structures, you know, around here as well. That's exactly what happens with the skin. Look at this line here. It's perfectly representation, right? Like just like 1, 2, 3, 4 pores in a line right there. There's a little micro wrinkle. And then obviously the stretch that's gonna happen, some pores gonna look more stretched out. So we're gonna be incorporating some of that stuff right now. And obviously, like the color is really gonna bring things to life at the end. But for now, let's go to this boring part here, which is just like regular pores. And we're gonna be using our little go-to carve brush. Same thing, like the little Alpha 39 with the little stroke. I'm not gonna even remind you guys anymore because that's basically what I use every time. So 0.02, lazy mouse. And then that's all based on the standard brush, right? That's basically like my version of the DAM standard without the pinching. It's just like a simple brush. So I'm gonna increase the intensity here. And I'm gonna start, you see, like I started like breaking up the symmetry around here because I already have the pores in there. So I'm gonna just keep doing this. Just gonna bring, see if it's working. Okay, it's working. It's gonna connect some of those guys, gonna make a little bit bigger. I'm gonna start connecting some of those. And then I'm gonna add some more directionality as well to some of the other ones. Making sure that everything looks very organic, right? Like if you're starting a line, just break it up, change direction just slightly, search for another row of pores and keep going the same way until you get like everything you need. So in the case of that guy in there, I was actually observing, he started doing that kind of like a little bit of that brain kind of structure that I mentioned before, just by incorporating some of those random lines connecting to one another, right? You get like this little brain structure. So you can keep doing this, you know, like as far as you want. I mean, like it all depends on how far you want to push it. But the general thing that I'm going to be doing here is mostly this. I'm going to be pulling some of those pores and adding some tension around this area here. Because you see, like I have some bigger wrinkles I'm going to be creating around here, like those ones, following the little lines in there, little pores. But then around here, I can actually get some of them and just make like a little bit smaller. And if I want to go even a little bit more like a micro version of this, just to add some more directionality, I can actually switch to that random brush I show you guys, the skin brush, that one with the little alpha. And then around here, let's see if the intensity is too high. Let's see. It's a little bit spread out as well. So let's just bring them closer together. So instead of placement at 1, let's use 0.5. Let's just type it here. If ZBrush allows me to type, but probably not. Let me just dock it or just use the brush here. Yeah, where's it? Alpha brush is here, right? I don't remember where to find this controller here, how to dock it. But anyway, 0.5 is fine. So let's do this. Oh, there you go. So it's a little bit strong right now, right? So let's make a little bit like 10 maybe, and a little bit bigger than that. So just gonna use them in a direction like this, just to actually add some, you know, like some directionality to the whole thing. So I'm gonna break up those pores so they don't look so even. And then individually, I'm gonna pick a couple of them. I'm gonna add that directionality so it kind of like, almost like add some tension to it, right? But now I'm gonna pick some individually and I'm gonna sculpt them a little bit deeper. So I'm gonna pick a couple of them, for example, those areas that have like a depth in there. I can just go and then like really sculpt. And then I can pick like from time to time a few of those pores and just like run over them. For example, if I show it around here, just run over them and just like stretch them. So you can add a little bit of that, you know, pore stretch like manually. And you can do that like in any place you want, right? Like it's always gonna depend of how far you wanna push in terms of detail, because you definitely have with HD geometry, enough stuff you can actually push, right? For example, like if you look at the image rendered from scan data, it doesn't have all this detail at all. They look very realistic because the depth is perfect, you know, it's capturing from the actual person. And but in terms of detail, this is much more detail than a scan data you're gonna get. So it's a matter of like how you're gonna modulate the skin to look like more realistic in terms of the variations in the depth and all that stuff. But everything I'm doing here is an extra bonus, right? Like if you want to do like extreme close-up renders, then it's a matter of like, okay, how far you're gonna push in terms of detail, because definitely the the amount of polygons is there for you. You know, it's like if you want to push it, you can totally do it. But for realistic renders, you definitely don't need all of that. But it's sure very cool to see it when you see like a close-up render with all this detail available. It's surely a cool thing to see, and to think that you can do all of this by hand. You know, it's like you just like it's something to be proud. You know, it's like after you finish the entire face and you have all the detail in place, and you start like, you know, it's like blending those areas and making more interesting. At the end, you have like a result that you're like, oh man, yeah, like, it took me a good chunk of time, but it's pretty cool that I can actually render and see all this super fine detail done by hand. You know, that's something cool to think about it. I really strive for like craftsmanship, right? For everything I do, I try to incorporate some of hard work, you know, because I think everything we do these days is like, it's too easy. Every year, technology gets better and things get too easy. And then there's something about connecting with the media, you know, it's like it can be traditional media or digital media. It's very cool that I don't think I'm gonna master anything ever, but I sure try to understand how things work, you know, and that drives me to be curious about stuff and get into different stuff. For example, like woodworking. I never did woodworking before, and I got into woodworking a couple of years ago, and I built some kitchen cabinets and a table for our kitchen that we use. You know, it's like a pinball machine, a digital pinball machine I built, and it was like a lot of woodwork I did in the past couple of years. I built a deck for our backyard, installed a hot tub myself, and everything like without having previous knowledge. You know, it's like just looking at tutorials on the internet. I was like, okay, how you install a hot tub? What's the type of wiring you have to use? I downloaded like a copy of the National Electric Code, installed the whole thing myself, got the inspector in here, got everything approved, and saved a ton of money in the process, man. I did our base, like we did our backyard here, and probably spent like, let's say like 15 grand altogether. It would cost like at least 45 to do what we did. And it's the kind of stuff like at the end, it was like, okay, it was, you know, suffering. I was waking up like at 6:30 in the morning in the winter to do stuff before I went to work. But then once it was done, man, and you're sitting outside, you know, it's like you're having a drink with your friends or whatever, and you just look like, man, we did this with our own hands. And I was like, this is so cool. And that's the kind of like a value I put in this type of work, you know. It's like I value when I see people doing a lot of manual work. Some people might think that they're idiots because there's like simpler ways to do it. I really appreciate the hard work, man. It's like, it's really something that drives me for sure. And you have, I mean, like it's part of a meditation exercise, right? If you're doing this kind of stuff, you have to have your brain in a space that's not like demanding of yourself. Basically, like if you start demanding and putting pressure on yourself, it's going to generate a lot of frustration. You know, it's like, it's always about like the trip, you know, it's like you just get on board and then you start doing the work, and then you don't even know where this is going to go. You know, it's like those classes to me are always very risky because I never know where those characters are going to get, especially this one that has no actual reference, right? And but I like that, you know, I like the taking the risk and experimenting with it, and eventually things might work because I have experience doing it, but it might as well not work, you know. So hoping for the best. Yeah, like this entire area here can actually go crazy with you can actually go a little faster here. Let's increase the intensity and just connect some of those guys a little faster here, just to generate this little tension. And then looking at the reference in there, when it gets to this area here, some of those pores are going to start getting a little deeper as well. So for that case, we have the little alpha that I show you guys, which is I have the elastic, what's that? That's a pore depth, right? That's the elastic brush with the drag rectangle. So I'm going to pick a couple of them here, and I'm going to just make them deeper. So I'm going to click that. all this kind of stuff, you know, it's like it's extra tiny layers of complexity that you add that help the overall look of the model at the end. Because otherwise, you always look very mechanical if you don't add all those, you know, like a variation for bumps and bruises and variation of pore depth and things like that. So it's like, it's again, like it's always going to be dependent of how much work you're going to be willing to put. That's how much of a good result you're going to collect at the end, you know. I'm really going to pick a few here. Hello.
No, I'm just sort of thinking again about how you mentioned that your approach basically to everything is through that lens of craftsmanship.
Yes, definitely.
And I'm just thinking, not that you were born in the wrong period, but it's funny that it's a nice contrast, because like you said, technology is becoming so much easier that you can, you know, like 3D print.
Yes.
At home.
Yeah.
But it's almost as though it's coming full circle, in the sense that you're able to do the same approaches that you could do woodworking or working with ceramics and this and that, but going using like technologies at a point where it's able to mimic very closely those crafts, basically.
Yeah, it's like I'm not against them at all. You know, it's like for example, like in my professional work, that's what we do. You know, it's like we work with scans and everything we can get our hands on, because we have to try to produce the most realistic result. But I mean, like in my personal life, I think like it might be a little naive, you know, but it's just the thing about going through life and trying to, you know, it's like to actually learn things. I think, you know, as being a little bit of a conspiracy theorist myself, not a little bit, pretty hardcore sometimes, but I always think about like this situation, you know, it's like not a literal zombie apocalypse, obviously, but a zombie apocalypse in a way that, for example, like if there's a situation of extreme crisis where, for example, like there is like a major earthquake or something, you know, something really major. And then all of a sudden we are back to the times where we just had skills to exchange. So for example, like money in a situation like that is almost like not, I'm really thinking about like an extreme situation, right? Money, for example, is not worth anything at that point, right? It's about like food and supplies of things, you know, it's like you can actually provide to your neighbors in exchange for other things. Or for example, what kind of like, you know, good it is to be a digital artist when everything goes to shit, right? Like, I mean, like in a situation like that. But now, if you know how to actually fix a car, for example, and then, you know, and your neighbor know how to bake, you know, some bread, and you're hungry, you know, you can exchange actual skills, you know, it's like, and I really appreciate that kind of stuff in a way that, you know, it's like, I think the more we get like, forward with our technology, we become like an extreme great like button pressers, right? Like we are like gadget oriented, so like every year there's a new gadget and all this stuff, but the actual skills how to do things with your hands is getting more and more you know, like lost somehow. And I really want my kids, you know, it's like to know more manual skills and actually be able to create things, you know. And this comes from someone who actually does, you know, everything, like all my sculptures are done digitally, right? It's not like I'm a clay sculpture or anything like that. But I try to use, you know, it's like this media here to express myself because it's the one I know the most. So it's faster for me to do stuff in CG. But then I get into that frustrated area that's like, okay, but I'm not using my hands to do anything. That's why I got into electronics. That's why I got into woodworking and all this stuff, because I want to make sure that I feel you know, useful in the real world instead of like concealed in this digital world that we live in, you know. And yeah, I think that's very, very important. I don't know why, but I think it is important. There are examples, right? Like recent, like a couple of years ago, that there is a situation of extreme snow. That was like feet and feet of snow, and then everything was closed down, shut down, and then people could not get to, you know, it's like to have access to supermarket and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden they started like totally zombie apocalypse. They start breaking into stores and then stealing stuff because they're hungry, right? And that lasted like for what, like a couple of hours or like a day or 2 days? I don't remember like how long that we went, maybe a week, I don't know. And it was already like a little preview of a zombie apocalypse, you know, that I'm talking about. Now imagine if a situation that extends like for months, you know, it's like that you don't have access to stuff. People are gonna go ape shit on each other, you know. So
I think a couple years ago there was like a big snow dump in Boston. And the whole city stopped working.
Yeah.
But in Canada, we watch that and we always laugh because unless it's like -50, you're still going to work and to school. So
oh yeah, exactly. You guys are like in t-shirts by that time.
But it's more, it's like you said, like I think it's just a matter of being equipped. Like in Europe, for instance, even though it's not as cold, because they're surrounded by water, you actually get more cold because it's more humid.
Oh yeah, more humid. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But and I think a lot of immigrants, it always takes them a couple years to realize that in Canada that you actually need to get the right boots, the right coat. There's a reason why you see Canadians or people who've been around for a long time wearing thinner coats, but that are actually warmer. It's just understanding that you need the proper gear for the environment you're in.
Exactly.
And once you understand that, it makes a big difference, which is why like people are able to sort of undertake some of these extreme weathers in Canada, you know, without sort of incapacitating a city. Like if you're in Montreal, you can go around the entire city without almost never having to come up at the surface, like just through different subway systems, different buildings connecting underground, and so on and so forth. So there's all these different things that are built around those needs, which is always interesting.
Yeah, it's like it fascinates me, man. I mean, like the only places I ever lived in was in Brazil, and then United States. I only lived in California, so my view is very skewed. You know, it's like because California is like you know, the politics are basically like the same across the board, and then you know, it's like the weather is kind of similar. I mean, like I live in Northern California now, but when I was back in Southern California, it was like was a different weather as well. So like hotter. And here in San Francisco, it's pretty cold. But yeah, I wish I was. I had more experience like living in other places just to figure it out. What you're saying, you know, it's like every place has a different thing going on. Here, what happens is that in San Francisco, because it's so cold for most of the year, actually, the summer is like a late summer. It starts like in around this time, you know, it's like September, October. Then you get like super hot days, and then when it's summer in San Rafael, where I live, then it's pretty cold in San Francisco, to the point that you have to go to work wearing a set of clothes and then a change, you know, sometimes when you get there, or just like bring a jacket or something. Yeah, it's pretty weird. Just adding some of those guys because I'm gonna have to add them later. So just I have them in there blocked, and then I'm gonna have to actually do a little bit more of add more variation in the length and the depth. So like bring some of them a little bit more into the lips. And then probably tomorrow we're going to be starting to sculpt some lips in here. And his lips, I think, going to be a good exercise because first you're going to have to make very symmetrical around there. But second, I'm gonna have to add like the impression that they're very dry lips as well. So that's gonna be a fun thing to do. Let's carve some of them in here. How are we doing with time? Oh, I think we're kind of like we are done with the time. But yeah, I'm gonna be working on basically like doing more of the same, just adding more of that stuff. Like I said, the face now, I kind of like, I like it a little bit better in terms of proportion, but not quite there. And oh, you guys, just a reminder, like you guys got the email today, right, about the Google Drive. So anything you have, you know, it's like drop in there, and then like probably like a few hours, maybe like 2 hours before the reviews, I'm gonna be downloading it. And just make sure that the files are not gigantic, otherwise sometimes it locks things down. And then there is one, I think it was in July, that I was trying to download everything, and I started like 2 hours before, but someone actually dropped a couple of files like last minute. And what happened, I think, is that Google, I think it has to compress everything before we download. And then Google decided to basically like recompress basically what was being downloaded already. So it had like probably like 40 minutes on already, like, you know, it's like downloading stuff. And then someone dropped a file, and then I think Google started like recompressing things again. And then all of a sudden I had to tell people like, you know what, it's not downloading yet. And I think we're gonna have to start the whole review thing a little bit later. And in fact, it took another hour to download. So we delayed quite a bit. So to prevent that, let's make sure that we have everything dropped in there, you know, at least a few hours before it. And please don't drop anything like last minute, because that can really complicate things and delay the entire session for everybody. So that's the only request I have. But other than that, just like, you know, make sure you post your stuff in there. I'm gonna love to see where you guys are at. And I wish I could review my own work, because I have a lot of criticism to give it. But again, guys, thanks again. I hope it was a good one today, like seeing the maps plugged in there and how they affect the surface and all that stuff. And then slowly you're gonna be chipping in and adding more and more detail to the entire thing, and hopefully come up with something cool at the end. So exciting times. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Chris.
Good night.
Thank you, Chris.
Have a great one. Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
don't forget to send me your request if you want a copy of the ZBrush, because I have to send like customized to you guys, right?
Okay.
See ya.
Yep.